If you're looking for a 5-seat SUV that won't break the bank and has a good amount of power and features, the Escape S might be exactly what you're looking for. This thing is powered by a 1.5-liter turbocharged engine. It's available either front wheel or all-wheel drive, and it has a ton of different options that are available inside of it. Steve here, Cars with Steve, and before we get started, I want to give a huge shout out and a thank you to Yorkdale Ford for giving me access to this vehicle to shoot the video for you today. Check down in the description below for their contact details. Now this is going to be a quick walk around looking at some of the basics of the Escape S. If you're looking for one on how that media screen works or how the steering wheel and instrument cluster work, check down in the description below because I have put together a comprehensive video on those systems as well. Now on top of that, I will hide an Amazon gift card code somewhere in this video. You're the first one to find it and claim it, and it's yours. But let's dive into it, have a little bit of fun, and see what's going on with the 2021 Ford Escape Base Model S. Starting off with some exterior styling of the Escape S. Now, the Escape S is going to have the same body styling, so the basic styling as the rest of the vehicle lineup, but it doesn't have a lot of the other technology that you will see in some of the higher trim levels. So which version of the vehicle you go with is going to be dependent on you, but if you don't care about the technology, you're just after a vehicle to get you from A to B, the front wheel drive Escape S is a great option. And that's just it. This thing is available standard front wheel drive. You can get it all wheel drive as well if you want a little bit more stability inside the winter time, off-roading, things like that. But I mean, if you're really concerned about the front wheel drive with the winter drive, you could always look at throwing some snow tires on this thing as well. Now looking at the actual tire itself, inside of the S version of the Escape, we've only got a 17-inch, and we are looking at Continental rubber inside of this thing. Now, as we start to move forward, we've got our traditional halogen headlamps. We do have the option for LEDs in some of the higher trim levels, and the Escape S will not have fog lamps whatsoever. So if you're looking for something with fog lamps or with some nicer features like park assist, etc., you're going to have to look at one of the higher trims. But like I said, it doesn't have too much to it, which is why it's at such a competitive price point. All right, now taking a peek underneath the hood of the Escape S. So looking at the Escape itself, it actually does have quite a few different engine choices that are available. So you've got a 1.5-liter turbo, there's a 2-liter turbo, there's a 2.5-liter Atkinson hybrid, there's a plug-in hybrid as well. So a lot of flexibility, but one thing to note, the Escape S is not available as a hybrid. We'd have to look at the SE, the SEL, the Titanium, and you cannot get the 2-liter turbo inside of the Escape S. So we are strictly looking at the 1.5-liter EcoBoost engine, so it's a turbocharged engine, but it's got an impressive amount of power. Like this thing can push out 181 horsepower and 190 pound-feet of torque. So plenty of power when it comes down to it. Now, Ford did opt to not go with an engine cover on this thing, and at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with that. So, I mean, aesthetically, yeah, you get to see all the engine components, but that's kind of the fun part of having a vehicle. So you can kind of see exactly what's going on, and one of the cool things is that we do have easy access to a few things, so we can easily top up some fluids if we need to, we can easily check our oil, and then we've also got easy access to the battery. So, I mean, it is a nice look and it is a nice layout underneath this thing. Like I said, if you're looking for something like a hybrid, you've got the SE Escape Hybrid, which Ford introduced this year. So, I mean, you do have that as an option instead. Now, looking at the rear styling of the vehicle, we do have a dual tip exhaust system inside of this vehicle. We're going to have the backup camera standard, but we've got our Escape badge, which was new for the 2020 model year, that went along with the redesign that came with it. We will also have our reverse wiper, and that's going to be standard across the entire vehicle lineup. So I do love the fact that we will have that no matter what. All right, next up, taking a peek at the key fob of the vehicle. So we've got our Ford logo along the back. Along the front of the fob, we've got our unlock and our lock button, as well as our horn or our panic alarm button. And then we've also got our key. So this is going to be the only Escape model where we've got the physical key. When we get into the SE trim level and above, that's when we're going to have the actual physical key fob instead. So which one you go with is ultimately going to depend on which feature set's important for you. Now, when it comes down to actually getting inside of the vehicle, so one thing you're going to want to make sure of is that the car is first unlocked. Now we do have a manual liftgate inside of this version of the vehicle, and if we look just underneath where the license plate would be, we've got a little handle there. We're literally just going to push the button that's underneath that, and that's going to unlock. Up we go. So as you can see there, it is very straightforward. Now, as I mentioned, inside of the S version of the vehicle, it is just going to be a manual liftgate. We do have the option for a power liftgate and a foot-activated liftgate if we're in some of the higher trims, but let's take a quick peek at the cargo dimensions. So as you can see there, we have plenty of width, depth, and height to the vehicle, which is definitely a nice thing. Now, it is a 60-40 split, so 60% driver, 40% passenger, so we can fold down one side or the other if we need to create a little bit of extra space in the back of the vehicle. Now, folding the seats down is also very straightforward. We do have to get inside of the vehicle, so driver passenger side, and we've got a little lever there, and we're just gonna pull that up in order to fold the seat down. But look at the difference in the depth when we have that second row folded down. Now, one thing to note though, we don't actually have to fold the seats down to get a little bit more space. We do have the flexibility of being able to move those second row seats up a little bit more. There is a little lever in between our legs in order to be able to slide each seat down individually if we want to. But there are a series of different cargo dimensions that are going to be showing up. One thing to note about the cargo dimensions as well, I do measure a few different ways. Now, one of the ways is going to be from the actual loading area, so from the bottom to the top, because if we slide in a little bit more, there will be a little bit of extra storage space up above as well. So definitely something to think about. Right now, as we move into the back of the vehicle, so a few things to point out. We've got a traditional 12-volt power point in the back there, which is nice because we do have that power point as an option as a default inside of the entire Escape lineup. On top of that, we've got our cover there. We do have the option for a thermoplastic rubber tray instead. We can get that at time of ordering, aftermarket accessory, etc. We can easily pull this guy out as well. Now, one thing to note, this is going to be a temporary, so a mini spare tire. We won't have the option for a full-size spare, but it is nice to know that we've got that mini spare. We've got our jack underneath. We've got our spigot, as well as a little bit of storage space along both sides as well. So it is nice to know that we can technically store a few small things back here if we needed to, and we could technically pull these trays out in the back if we wanted to create a tiny bit more space as well. It's just nicely organized when we keep those on. Now, looking at some standard technology in the vehicle, so we're always going to have our backup camera no matter what. There is the option for the reverse sensing system. It's not going to come standard inside of the S trim level of the vehicle, but what will come standard is the Ford Copilot 360 package, which means we've got our blind spot system, so lets us know if anybody's at the blind spot on either side of the vehicle, and then we've also got our base lane keeping system that's going to be standard in there as well. When it comes down to filling up fuel inside of the vehicle, very straightforward. So just along our driver's side, as you can see, we've got a little cutout there, and it's a capless system. So just insert your fuel hose, fill up, and you're good to go. Now, when it comes down to the fuel quality, regular 87 octane, 87 gas is all you need to use inside of this thing. That's the minimum manufacturer's recommendation. You don't need to use a higher premium fuel, but you will notice a slight improvement in fuel economy and performance when you do. Looking at second row spacing inside of the Escape, so I'm 6 feet tall, driver's seat set up for somebody who's 6 feet tall, and I still have a nice amount of knee space, good amount of foot space, and up overhead I've got about 3 inches of headroom. So it's not quite as much headroom as we might see on a vehicle like the Bronco Sport, but it is nice to know that there still is quite a little bit of space up overhead. Now, this specific one obviously does not have the sunroof. You'd have to be in one of the other options in order to get that sunroof as an option, but it is nice to know that it is there. Now, one of the cool things about the Escape is that these second row seats are actually fully adjustable. So along our left and right hand side, we've got a little lever there. We can crank that in order to literally recline the seat a little bit, so forwards and backwards, which is nice. But in between our legs, there's also another one which will allow us to slide the seat forwards and backwards even more. So if we need to create a little bit more space for some cargo in the back, we can do that without actually having to fold these seats down. So that is kind of a nice touch. Now, a few other things to point out, just along the left-hand side, we do have a few bottle holders along the driver-passenger side. We've got a few handles there. Up overhead, we've got our holy crap handle, as well as a little hook. Now, one other thing to point out, this specific one, so the S version of the vehicle will not have cup holders in that back row, something to think about. We don't have any pockets in behind the driver passenger seat as well, but we do have a 12-volt power point. So our traditional cigarette lighter adapter, we can plug that in the back here if we want to. But one thing to note, we do not have our USB port. Not too much else other than that. We have a few cabin lights in the back here that are controlled from the driver in the front. Taking a peek along our driver's side door, so the Escape S does not have the intelligent access, so we do need to actually unlock the vehicle to get inside. But once we're in there along the door, as you can see, we've got our unlock and our lock buttons. We've got the basics for our side view mirror control. We can figure out what's going on with our windows, so up, down. Along the driver passenger side, we also do have a little storage area there, so it's nice to know that we can store bottles, things like that if we need to. As we start to actually move inside, so just to the left-hand side of the steering wheel, so you can see we've got a series of different buttons there. So this one is going to let us figure out what's going on with our running lamps. We can either increase or decrease the brightness of the cluster screen. Just to the left-hand side of the steering wheel, we are manual adjust inside of the S version of the vehicle. And that's going to be the same as the actual seat itself. So the first one there, as you can see, that's going to actually let us bring the seat up and down. We can adjust our backrest, so we can bring that forwards and backwards, and then we can actually slide the seat forwards and backwards on the inside there as well. Just to the left-hand side of the pedals, as you can see there, we do have our hood release, so we're just going to pull twice in order to be able to pop the hood. Right now, hopping inside of the driver's seat of the vehicle, fairly comfortable. Like, these are cloth seats, which are going to be standard inside of the S trim level of the vehicle. We've got an adjustable headrest as well, which is nice, and that's going to be the same for the first and the second row seats. Next up, let's take a peek at the steering wheel of the vehicle. So this is actually fairly straightforward. It's not as difficult as you might think. So starting off with the left-hand side there, this is going to be the basics for our audio. So we can either increase or decrease the actual volume. We can mute out from there. And this is going to be the basics for our cruise control. So we're going to turn cruise on. We can set it at our speed, increase or decrease 1 kilometer or 1 mile per hour at a time by moving this up or down. And we can also cancel it out there very simply. Along the right-hand side, we've got a series of different options that are available. So we can either change between songs or radio stations, we can answer or hang up on a phone call. We've got our voice command prompt as well, so we can do things like change radio stations, make a phone call, etc. So we've got a little bit of flexibility there. We can kind of see what's going on with the screen off to the right-hand side there. So when we press that button there, and we can simply cancel it out if we want to. Now, we also do have these buttons. So this is going to be our basic back button for this middle screen. This is going to be the up-down in order to get between different sub-screens. And then this is going to be our sub-menu button as well. So we can push that in order to get into a few other options. So let's kind of start off with our first one, so our trip counter. So we've got our basic trip counter. If we want to reset, we're just going to press and hold this middle button on the steering wheel. So as you can see there, reset all values for us. And then we can press this button along the top right to change between our trip 1, trip 2. We can reset views, configure the view as well. So if we wanted to have different things show up, like our fuel, distance to empty, things like that, those will all show up as other options there. Moving down, we've got our basic SOA, we've got our kilometer, so digital speedometer. We can have that showing up. We've got our eco coach, and we've got a few other things. So we can literally select whatever we want to on this specific screen. Moving down a bit more, we've got some basics for driver assistance. So we've got our traction control, which we can easily toggle on or off. Our blind spot system lets us know if anybody's under the blind spot on either side of the vehicle. We've got our pre-collision assist system. So if the vehicle senses a potential collision, it's actively going to brake for us. And we can turn that system off if we want to. Lane keeping system, we've got 3 different modes. So our alert is going to give us a little bit of a steering wheel shake, almost as if we're running over rumble pavement. The aid is actually going to balance us back out, and it's going to kind of bump us back into our lane. So if we start to veer over without signaling, it's going to just pull us back into our lane for us, and then the alert and the aid will do both. So it'll shake the steering wheel and gently nudge us back into our lane. We've got the intensity of the actual steering wheel shake itself. We've got our driver alert. So if we veer over too many times, we're going to get a message letting us know we should probably take a break. And then we've also got our cross traffic alert. So as we go to back up, if the vehicle senses that there's a potential collision because somebody's coming to our left or right, it's going to let us know of a potential collision there as well. Moving down, we've got the ability to change between AM, FM, etc. If we had a USB stick with MP3s on it, that would show up. If our cell phone was connected there as well, that would also show up as an audio source. Moving down, we've got our phone. If that was connected, it would show up. And we've got some other vehicle settings. So basic information, we've got our seatbelt, so we can see what seatbelt is currently plugged in. We've got our auto start stop, so it lets us know if that system's activated or not. Our driver alert, so as we get notifications, that's going to continue to go up until it reaches the very top, letting us know we should probably take a break. We've got our My Key info. So My Key lets you do certain things, so give you certain limitations for the actual fob itself, so we can easily, if you want to, set a certain speed limit. So if someone driving with a specific fob, maybe you can't go more than 100 kilometers an hour. So you've got that flexibility. And we've also got our tire pressure and then our oil life. So we can just move up and down between the screens there. I'm just kind of going back and forth to let you know which each one is. Moving back again, we've got our basics for our display. So we can go between English, Spanish, French. We've got our liters per 100, miles per gallon, etc. Celsius and Fahrenheit as well. And from there, we've got some driver assistance settings, which we've already seen these things. So our traction control, blind spot system, etc. We've got other vehicle settings there as well. So we've got our basic vehicle lighting. Hopping inside, we've got our auto lamp delay. So when we go to lock the vehicle, how long do the lamps stay on for? So I believe it's 10, 20, or 120 seconds. Back again, and let's move down. We've got our locks. So what's going on with the lock? So vehicle auto unlock, yes or no? Do we want to have a mislock chirp? So if we don't properly shut the doors, will we get a chirp letting us know about that? When we go to remote unlock the door, do all doors become unlocked, or is it just the driver door? And then we've got our switch inhibitor as well. Remote start. So on the fob itself, we actually don't have remote start on the fob, but we can remote start using the Ford Pass app, or we can do an aftermarket remote start install. But when we remote start, what happens? Is the system off completely? For climate, do we let the vehicle determine what the cabin temperature should be, or is it based off of our last settings? And what's the duration, 5, 10, or 15 minutes? We've got our wiper, so courtesy wipe. So if we've got our wipers going, it's going to take 1 second after the last wipe, and then it's going to clear away any excess liquid with one more wipe. And then we've got our reverse wiper. So do we want the reverse wiper on? Yes, no. When we're in reverse, and that's going to be the basics of our vehicle settings. And then we've got the My Key setup, and that's where we're going to go in order to set up the actual My Key. And then we're back to our basic trip counter there as well. So that's going to be the basics of navigating the steering wheel. If we look just to the left-hand side there, so that stick there, we've got a button just on the very tip of the stick. That's going to turn the lane keeping system on or off. We've got our high beam flash there as well. Looking at the stick on the right-hand side, that's going to be the basics for our windshield wipers. So we can adjust the speed there. We can pull in towards us for the front wiper fluid, push away for the rear. And then we've also got our rear wiper control there. So we can adjust the rear wiper by moving this up or down if we want to. So very, very straightforward. Now, one thing to point out, I had mentioned it earlier, the Escape S is only available with a regular key. So when we get into the SE and above, so the SE, all the titanium, it's going to be push button start, but inside of the S trim level, we are just a regular key button, key to start this thing up, which not necessarily a bad thing, because if you don't care about the extra technology, you don't have to worry about needing it, because we still do have a regular key fob there. All right, next up, let's take a peek at the media screen. So this is going to be very straightforward. This is because there's not a ton of stuff to the screen itself. So this is where we're actually going to go to get our presets there. So as you can see, we're jumping between different presets. So in order to be able to set a preset up, it's actually really straightforward. Literally all we're going to do is tune to whatever station we want to. So we can tune this way, or we can tune using our voice. Once you've got the station that you want to be able to save, all you're going to do is press one of these buttons. You press and hold it. And as you can see, it's now saved it as a preset. So we moved to one of the other options, back to our preset, and it saved it for us. Moving down, we've got our volume rocker. So very, very straightforward there. We can tune this way. We can also press the voice command prompt on the steering wheel to tune using our voice instead. Then we can cancel it using that back button along the very bottom there. Looking along the top, we can change between our sources, so AM, FM, etc. And then push in OK, there we go. We can also press the OK button there. So as we're kind of jumping between different things, we can move up and down this way if we want to go that route. And then again, as I mentioned, all we're going to do is just press the OK button, or just give it a second and it'll eventually time out as well. Looking at that, we've got our Bluetooth as well, so we can easily set up Bluetooth on our phone. And that's one thing to note, is that we can set up Bluetooth for phone calls, and that's it. We don't have the flexibility to use Android Auto or Apple CarPlay inside of this, but if you want to at least make phone calls, we can easily do that. So on your phone, all you're going to do is make sure that Bluetooth is turned on. Okay, and we're going to make sure we add a phone.
Search for your vehicle on your device and select it once it is found.
Okay, so we're just waiting for Ford Escape to show up along the bottom, so we're just going to press Ford Escape.
Confirm that the pin displayed on sync matches the pin displayed on your device.
So we want to make sure these match up, and they do, so we're going to hit pair and yes. Do we want to allow contacts and favorites to sync? Yes.
For your safety, please stay alert to changing road conditions and use Sync's voice-activated features while your vehicle is in motion.
Okay. So as you can see, I'm now connected. Now, a few other things that I want to make sure I do. 911 assist, you always want to make sure you turn that one on. And the reason why is because if the vehicle senses that there's a potential collision, it's going to automatically dial 911 for us. And then download contacts, yeah, we want to make sure we do that as well. And then we want to move to the top, and then we want to confirm our selection. As you can see there, we've got my recent calls, contacts, dial pad, and a few other things. So it is nice to know that we've got the phone connected, and it really is that simple to be able to connect the phone as well. So as you can see there, we've got a few different options. We move into our mobile apps. We've got my Ford Pass app now. We've got LiveX Live, which is a radio app. So we can use the radio app directly through this screen. So without using Sirius XM, AM, FM, etc., we've got the flexibility to use some mobile apps directly through this middle screen, which I think is a nice touch, especially because there's not too much to this thing. We do at least still have a little bit of flexibility. Pressing this button along the very top gives us a few more options. So the very top, we can turn the display off if we want to. Just button press to turn it back. We've got our media based off our Bluetooth stereo. We've got our Bluetooth connection there as well. So we can turn Bluetooth on or off. We can add a Bluetooth device. We can view devices as well. So we've got my phone there. We can disconnect it. We can remove or look at my device information. So if we go remove, let's remove it. And 3, 2, 1, it is now fully disconnected. So it really is that simple, adding a phone into this vehicle. And moving back, as you can see there, the phone is now disconnected. Moving down, my mobile apps are now disabled as well because I've removed it from the vehicle. We've got the basics for our clock, so mode. We've got our time there, so we can easily select what's going on with our time. And we've got our 24-hour mode, so if you prefer that military time, yes or no. So you've got a few options when it comes down to it. We've got our different languages there, so we can move between English, Spanish, or French if we want to. We've got our distance units, so we've got our kilometers and liters per 100. We've got our Celsius, about, software licenses, and we can do our master reset. So if we're going to be selling the vehicle, we can do a complete master reset to bring it back to our factory defaults instead. Moving back again, and scrolling down, we've got our display, so we can adjust the brightness, and we can have it set to an auto mode, which means the vehicle is going to flip it between the daytime or the nighttime mode, depending on how bright it is outside. So, I mean, which one you go with is ultimately going to depend on you and which look you like the look of the most. So, I mean, up to you, but as I said, the vehicle is going to automatically determine what the vehicle is going to be, so whether it's in that day or nighttime mode, based off of the brightness. 911 assist, we can turn that one on or off. Forward Pass Connect, so the vehicle is equipped with an onboard modem, so we can use it as a hotspot for up to 10 devices. We do need a data-only plan through our cell phone provider in order to be able to get that, but it is available there as an option. We've got our connectivity settings there as well. We've got our auto system updates, which I always recommend turning the auto system updates on. And the big reason why is because if the vehicle senses an update's available, it's automatically going to update the vehicle for us. Moving down, we've got our Wi-Fi connection, so definitely make sure automatic system updates on. Wi-Fi connected, you want to make sure you connect to your Wi-Fi network at home. And then we've got a few other options there. Moving down, we've got our basics for voice control. The advanced mode means we won't get as many notifications. So if we go to change the station, it's not going to confirm the station choice, make phone calls, things like that. So we've got a few different options. Phone confirmation, do you want to call such and such person? And then the command list. When we press the voice command prompt on the steering wheel, this is the command list. So whether that shows up or not is going to be a matter of preference. We've got our valet mode, so if we are going to be valet parking the vehicle, or just for general security, we can enter in a 4-digit number in order to be able to lock the screen out. So people can't look through the screen, look through our previously saved phone calls and things like that as well, which definitely is a nice thing. And I think that was actually it. Moving down, parking, a few more. So we've got our parking, so our rear camera delay. So as we go to put the vehicle in reverse, so actually, speaking of which, let's throw the vehicle in reverse for a second. Like, look at this. Look at this tiny little screen. Like, we could technically zoom if we wanted to, but I mean, at the same time, so yeah, look at that. So we can kind of zoom in, but I mean, it's a tiny, tiny screen. So if you don't care about the technology, cool. But I mean, at the same time, it is pretty small, but it is nice to know that the backup camera at least shows up there. And as I mentioned, the rear view camera delay, when we actually go to shift it into reverse, is whether or not there's a delay in the actual camera. Rear occupant alert. So when we go to turn the vehicle off, we've also got this notification letting us know that we should check the back seats as well. We can close that out easily if we wanted to. And that's going to be the basics of the actual sync media screen. As we start to move down a little bit, we can change between songs or radio stations, play or pause. We've got our basic back button, and then we've also got our sound settings. So we can change up the treble, mid-range bass, balance, fade, and a few other things. So a little bit of flexibility there, which is definitely a nice thing. Now, as we start to move down a tiny little bit, so a few things to point out there. As you can see, we've got our basics in order to be able to close our vents off if we wanted to. As we start to move down a tiny little bit more, so a few other features there. So as you can see, we've got our basics for our climate control. So we are just single zone inside of this trim level of the vehicle. We've got our basic climate control settings there as well. Now you might just be able to make it out, but we've got 2 USB ports as well, so we can easily plug our phone in if we want to. So we've got our USB as well as our USB-C, and then there also is a traditional 12-volt power point, so our cigarette lighter adapter. We can plug that in as well if we need to. Now, as we start to move down even more, so a few more things to point out. As you can see there, we've got a rotary dial shifter, electronic parking brake, and our auto hold setting. So the auto hold setting is the one that's going to hold us in place. So if we come to a complete stop with the auto hold setting on, we can take our foot off the brake and it's going to hold us in place. Moving down a tiny little bit more, so a few other things. We do have our drive mode, so we can select between different modes there. And then we've got our auto start stop, and that's the one that's potentially going to kill power to the engine if we're stopped for an extended period of time. As we move down, we've got a little storage area there and our armrest. There isn't much to it. It's literally just that, a little storage area there. As we move up overhead, we do have our rear view mirror, and this is not auto dimming. So inside of the Escape S, we've got our little flip switch there in order to be able to dim it out if things are a little bit too bright behind us. Moving up overhead a bit more, we've got our basic controls for our cabin lights. We also do have a sunglasses holder. We've got our visor, as well as a little business card holder up along the top. Pulling this down, another business card holder with our vanity mirror, and there's no light inside of this vanity mirror. But one of the nice things is that we can extend it out a tiny little bit. Click it in order to lock it back into place. But it is nice to know that this thing, even though it's very simple, it at least has the basics. So if you're just looking for something A to B, cost effective, the Escape S is a good option. All right, now time for the fun part. Let's take this thing out for a spin and see how this thing handles. Now, this is the base of the entry-level Escapes of the Escape S. So it's got a 1.5 liter turbocharged engine. It's the same Escape engine that we're going to find inside of the SE and the SEL gas versions of the vehicle. Oh, one thing I forgot to do, I did not put it into sport mode. So, flipping it out, sport mode on the fly. That's one of the cool things about the Escape, is that you do have the flexibility of just pressing that button in order to be able to change out your drive mode as you go. And honestly, like 90% of the time, I would say I would absolutely recommend keeping it in sport mode. And the reason why is because it's going to hold your RPMs longer. It's a better drive. It just feels nicer. Your accelerator goes just that tiny little bit more. Here we go. What do you say to that? It's nice and like surprisingly comfortable. Like for it being a base model, like you wouldn't really expect much comfort wise. Like that's just absolutely not the case with this thing. Like I am actually super surprised how comfortable of a drive this really is. That's nice. It's super spacious too. Like that's one of the cool things. Like with the seat all the way down, like this is ridiculous. Like I've got almost 6 inches of headspace up overhead. Now that's one thing to note, because the Escape S, we're not looking at an option where we can get the sunroof as well. So, I mean, if you want the roof, you're gonna have to go a little bit of a higher trim level, but I mean, space-wise, this is crazy. Now, don't get me wrong, my cars have sunroofs, and the reason why, like, I love it. I drive with my roof open. I mean, it's just one of those things. I love it, but I mean, everybody's going to be different. But whether you go for an option where you need the sunroof, don't want the sunroof, whatever the case may be, really ask yourself what you need out of a car. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really advocating for the base models of some vehicles, because if you're just looking for something to get you A to B, you don't care about any of the extra stuff. The base model of the Escape and even the base model of the Bronco Sport are great options for vehicles. I love it. And you've got a lot of the same safety features that you're going to find in some of the higher trim levels. Like you've got your backup camera, you've got your blind spot system, you've got your lane keeping system. Like there is so much packed into the value that you get out of this thing. Like I said, that's one of the big reasons why, like, if you don't care about the technology, and the big piece of technology, the Sync media screen. Because when you get into the SE trim level, that's when you get the Sync 3 screen, which gives you Android Auto and Apple CarPlay capabilities. Do you need it? No. But at the same time, having that screen means that we can use our maps on our phones. We can use Google Maps, Apple Maps, or Waze directly through the middle screen. I mean, sure, could you just throw your TomTom or whatever the case may be up there and use that instead? Absolutely. But it is nice to have it kind of like fully integrated. Now, one thing I love is the auto hold setting. Because like we've got that setting turned on. My feet, like I can take my foot off the brake completely. It's gonna hold you in place. Like that auto hold setting is so nice, especially when you're in stop and go traffic, because rather than having to shift the car into park, you can be in drive, take your foot off the brake, and the car is gonna hold in place until you either put on the brake or hit the gas again in order to get the vehicle going, or you just toggle that switch off again when you're hitting the brake. So it is nice to know, like, we do have some pretty smart technology inside of these vehicles. The one thing, the reverse sensing system, and then the tiny backup camera. So yeah, with the tiny backup camera, don't think you're really gonna rely on that backup camera too much, but it's there. It's at least there if you need it, but nothing wrong with going old school instead. Guys, that was a look at the 21 Escape S. What did you think? Like I said, if you're budget conscious looking for something A to B, the S is a good option. But if you're looking for something else, check down in the description below, because I have put together comprehensive videos on the rest of the Escape lineup. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your social networks. Until I see you next time, take care.